We still have people joining us, but just because we have a lot going on tonight, I'm going to start us off. So here's the official beginning of our webinar. Good evening to everyone who's here tonight. There are 212 of you. I'm Karen Oberhauser. I'm a member of the Monarch Butterfly Fund board, and I'm also the director of the University of Wisconsin-Madison Arboretum and a long-term monarch researcher and conservation biologist. In fact, last year marked my 36th year studying monarchs. I've studied them in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Mexico, Texas, and California. It's been quite a journey. So on behalf of all of my fellow board members, who you can see on your screen, I'd like to welcome all of you to our first webinar. We're happy that you're here. A little bit about the Monarch Butterfly Fund. The fund supports partners in Mexico. From the very beginning, our work has been conducted in a spirit of respect and admiration for these partners who are doing so much to care for the monarchs that we see each spring, summer, and autumn in the eastern half of the United States and southern Canada. Our work is funded by dedicated donors from all over the world. If you've supported us, thank you so much for your trust in the work that we do. Throughout the evening, you'll have the chance to meet all of our MBF board members, either as presenters or introducers. Our goal this evening is to provide a sampling of the work that we do to promote monarch conservation in Mexico, and as a result, the long-term sustainability of the Eastern North American monarch population. While we don't have time to recognize all of the work that's being done to preserve the Western migratory population, I'd like to recognize that there is amazing work being done west of the Rocky Mountains and in the California wintering sites as well. But before we get started, I just have a few Zoom directions. Some of us may feel like we spend all of our days on Zoom these days, but maybe some of you don't. So here are a few directions. This is a webinar, which means you won't be able to see or hear each other, but you can continue to communicate as you are doing so well right now using the chat function on your Zoom screen. So if you haven't seen this yet, there's a bunch of buttons at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you just click on the one that says chat, you'll see all of the chat that's coming up and you'll be able to chat with us. And you can either send messages to the panelists or to the panelists and all of the participants and attendees as well. Or if you have a friend up there that you see and you want to send them a private message, you can send individual messages as well. So feel free to say hi to everyone, where you're from and why you love monarchs in the chat box. If you have questions that you want us to answer during the webinar, don't use the chat box because, as you can see, it would be really difficult for us to monitor that box for questions. So if you have a question, ask your question by clicking on the Q&A box, which is also at the bottom of your screen, really close to the chat link. And if you see someone else has asked a question that you care about, or maybe it's the same question, what you can do is just give that question a thumbs up and that'll move it higher up in the question queue. And we'll be able to get to the questions that the most people are interested in. We probably won't be able to get to all of the questions, but we will save them and try to send out responses to all of the attendees. So thank you again very much for watching, for joining us tonight. There are 251 of you here right now. And I'm going to turn things over now to my colleague and friend, Gail Morris, who will introduce our first speaker. And here's hoping for no technical difficulties. Gail, take it away.
Thank you, Karen. I am very excited to introduce our first speaker of the evening, kick off our night. Ernest Williams, a butterfly ecologist, MBF board member, and professor of biology emeritus at Hamilton College, discuss how the forest protects overwintering monarchs in Mexico.
Okay, so is the screen, let's see, here we go. So the screen should be visible to everyone now. Thanks, Gail, and welcome to everyone who's joining us. I am going to talk about how the forest protects monarchs, overwintering monarchs, in several different ways. And all the work that I'll describe was done jointly with Lincoln Brower, a grand old man of monarch studies who passed away 2 years ago. I'll say a little bit more about Lincoln at the end. But to turn to the forest, I'm using this image, this photo, which shows a colony in one of the forests in the Mexican mountains. And I'm using this just to say we're first going to talk about the canopy and the forest itself. And the canopy provides several benefits as a blanket, as an umbrella, and as a windshield. Now, actually, the speaker after me is going to use either this image or one like it and talk more about what you're seeing in monarchs and how many you're seeing. But to turn to the effects of the canopy, I want you to look at this graph of temperatures, and you'll see that it's over various days of the winter. We're looking at temperatures. And the gray line shows the temperature in a clearing just outside the forest, just outside where the monarchs are aggregated. And it's warm in the day and it's cold at night. And you'll notice where freezing is, that oftentimes in the clearing, it gets down to freezing at night. Now look at the line that's in black, and this is the temperature under the canopy, temperature in the forest. It's not as warm during the day, it's not as cold at night, and it rarely gets down to freezing. Now, of course, monarchs have left the upper tier of states in Canada to come to Mexico to avoid the extreme cold temperatures that we experience, because they don't survive deep freezes. So one of the first important protective effects of the forest, of the canopy, is that it serves as an insulating layer, as a blanket. Not only does it protect them from freezing, but it also protects them from becoming too warm during the day. And that's another important point, because monarchs are ectotherms, and that means that their body temperature adjusts to that of the conditions in which they find themselves. And because monarchs accumulate the energy, the fuel, the fat supplies that keep them alive during the winter, that's accumulated before and during migration. If they become too warm during the winter, they can use up their energy supplies too quickly and not survive the winter. So they're both effects provided by this insulating layer. By the way, you'll also notice that on clear days, the temperatures are more extreme, both up and down. So this insulating effect is the first. And that's shown more importantly in this graph. And I want you to notice here we're looking at days of winter, looking at the amount of energy, that is fat or lipid, that monarchs have to survive the winter. And they start with a fair amount of lipid, and it keeps them alive during the winter. And then they have some at the end of the winter to begin the reverse migration in February and March. If they were too warm, they would use up that energy supply too quickly and may not be able to survive the winter. An important point is that there's very little nectar, very little food available during the winter, so they are dependent on what they've accumulated. If you look at the figure or the photo in the upper left, here you're seeing two female abdomens. And I took this photo in the middle of January in one of the colonies. One female has a very thin abdomen and one has a plump abdomen. The one with the plump abdomen is well set for surviving the winter. The one with the thin abdomen probably is not. She is probably doomed because of insufficient energy. It is the lipid supplies that keep them alive and functioning during the winter. Now, two other effects of the canopy. One is that the canopy also serves as an umbrella, which is to say it keeps monarchs clustered in the forest from becoming wet. And we do know as temperatures plummet, dry monarchs survive better than wet monarchs. Wet monarchs are more subject to freezing. So another effect of the canopy is to keep them dry. A third effect is that the canopy blocks wind from blowing the clusters of monarchs onto the forest floor, which is where it's much colder. So those were all effects of the canopy. Now let's look under the canopy, where monarchs are clustered either on boughs or branches, as shown on the left here, or on tree trunks, as shown on the right. And we'll ask several questions. This is what we did. We first went down to ask, under the canopy, is there a thermal advantage to monarchs clustering on the boughs or branches? Having looked at that, we then moved on to look at the effect of clustering on tree trunks. Is there a thermal advantage there? And then that led to looking at where the clusters occur vertically above the forest floor. And so I'll tell you a little bit about what we found on each. First of all, the clusters on the boughs or branches. We took dowels and attached little temperature recording devices on the dowels such that at least one was outside the cluster and one, concealed, was inside the cluster. And we looked at the differences. As you can see below, there was a very slight difference. During the day, inside the cluster is slightly cooler outside, and at night, inside the cluster is slightly warmer. But notice these effects are really very small. There isn't much difference there. So what happens on the tree trunks? We guessed, and when I say we, I mean, I'm really talking about Lincoln Brower and other collaborators. We knew from earlier studies that when storms had struck the overwintering colonies, that more monarchs survived from the tree trunks than survived from the boughs and branches. And that was true both a 1981 storm and a 1992 storm. So we thought that the tree trunks probably provide a good thermal advantage in that a tree trunk is wet wood. And as wet wood, it has a high heat capacity. Tree trunks warm up slowly during the day, and they cool off slowly at night. So one can think of them as having something of a hot water bottle effect. And you can see that effect very clearly in this graph. And this is similar to the graph I showed you before. We're looking over days of the winter, looking at temperatures. And in this case, the black line shows the temperature in a clearing just outside where the colony was found. Warm in the day, cold at night. The gray line shows the temperature under the canopy, in the forest under the canopy. And again, the temperatures are buffered, not as warm in the day, not as cold at night. But look at the innermost line. This is the temperature right on the tree trunks, the line with the little open diamonds. Again, even more buffering, greater thermal protection, thermal buffering. Now, how much? The data here at the top show you that when you're looking at fairly large trees, the difference is quite significant. On the tree trunk, the conditions are up to 2 degrees centigrade, 4 Fahrenheit, warmer at night, and about the same much cooler during the day. So there's ever greater buffering. Now, in these studies, we used the largest trees in the reserve where the monarchs are that we could find, and they went up to about 80 centimeters diameter. These are the trees in the reserve that we had looked at. But occasionally you can find a stump showing that there have been larger trees in the past. And other studies of nearby completely undisturbed forests show that some trees have gotten up to 140 centimeters in diameter. That's a pretty big tree. And these larger trees, if we imagine hundreds of years ago, before any disturbance, that there were larger trees, they would provide even greater thermal advantage, as well as more space, more surface area for roosting. This then took us to the third study, looking at where clusters occur. And this graph shows temperature profiles, vertical profiles from the ground of from the forest floor up to the treetops. And it's cold up in the treetops, it's cold on the forest floor. The warmest location is vertically, it's right in the middle. And that's in fact where you find most of the monarch clusters. You'll also notice on the side that a dense forest provides more of a buffer for temperature change than does a thinned, partially logged forest. So those are studies that we did looking at the clusters. And now I want to say just a little bit about Lincoln. It was my privilege to work with him in Mexico and on these clusters. The figure that you're seeing on the right shows Lincoln with all his co-authors. In his career, he published 167 technical scientific articles, in addition to many other writings as well. This figure shows the connection of Lincoln to all his co-authors, which by chance, purely by chance, there are 167 co-authors. And it also shows the connections among the co-authors. I'll point to the most important co-author was his wife, Linda Fink, who, even when she was not an official co-author, was a critic and reviewer of all his work. And many of these people were brought to studying monarchs by Lincoln. He had a pretty broad effect in the monarch world. Because of all that Lincoln had done, people in Mexico erected this memorial to him on Sierra Cinque, near where the first studies were done. The plaque on this memorial reads, "For his passion for monarchs, nature, science, and conservation." And I think that it's hard to top that phrase. Lincoln brought many of us into all this work and had done a great deal on conservation of monarchs. So let me just come back and end by pointing out the importance of the forest. An intact forest is very important for overwintering monarchs. It acts as, the canopy acts both as an insulating layer, a blanket, as something of an umbrella, a rain shield, as a wind block, keeping monarchs from being blown off to the forest floor. The tree trunks provide something of a hot water bottle effect, and we find that the clusters occur mostly at intermediate vertical heights, which is where they find the warmest conditions. And so that's a story about the forest and how the forest protects overwintering monarchs. And Gail, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ernest, for a wonderful discussion. And we have a few questions for you. A reminder, if you have any questions for any of our presenters, to use the Q&A at the bottom so we can select some to be answered. Okay, why aren't pollinator flowers planted in Mexico to feed the winter butterflies?
Well, I think I would start by saying, when you look at what is in flower during the winter, there's very little nectar there. It would be a remarkable challenge to try to provide food, fuel, nectar during the winter where the monarchs are. They're high up on mountains, and I think it would not work very well to try to provide flowers. But also recognize that monarchs are adapted to these conditions. They're adapted to fueling up during migration, and it is that fuel that keeps them functioning and alive during the winter. Most of them have fattened up sufficiently to make it. And so I think their biology is adapted to the conditions that they have encountered. And I don't think it would be that useful to think of adding flowers. I hope that answers.
Thank you. Are the number of trees in the area increasing?
Oh dear. Well, there has been some history of logging. The people with the reserve and people with the authorities in Mexico say that they have stopped the most serious logging. There still is some logging, and it's not that trees are increasing. The real concern are threats to the forest, that there's thinning of the forest or cutting of the forest. Those are the real concerns. The threats are multiple, including climate change that's changing the distribution of trees on the mountaintops, economic trends where farmers may be moving up the mountainsides into the buffer areas to the overwintering sites. So there are multiple threats, and the real concern is keeping the forest in as intact condition as we can for overwintering protection.
Okay, thank you. Last year, the monarchs were very active all season. More dead monarchs who did not have enough lipids to survive.
Oh, certainly with climate change and warmer conditions, they may be more active. And people should understand that monarchs do become active on warmer days to fly out and drink water. Like all insects, they can dry out and they do need to go drink, and they will do that. Under warmer conditions, they may be more active, and that could lead to using up some lipid supplies, but I think I can't give any definitive answer about what happened last year. Those are generalities.
Okay. I have one last question here for you. Do monarchs build up most of their lipid reserves in Canada or the northern United States? And let me slide down here. Everything kind of moved on me as I was reading it to you. Or do they increase their supply as they head south?
This is something I have not worked on myself, but my understanding reports are that they're nectaring the whole way down. They nectar heavily in Texas, and they're building up their winter fuel all the way. Now in Mexico, I don't know. I don't know what's available in Mexico. We do know that they're nectaring heavily down through Texas.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ernest. We may have an opportunity at the end to review some more of the questions for Ernest. For now, I would like to invite Eli Moreno, another of one of our board members, to introduce our next.
Hello.
We can hear you, Eli.
Oh,
And
hello,
we
everyone.
see you.
I want to introduce our next speaker. It's going to, he will talk about some fascinating subject, which is the one of how do we count the monarch butterflies in the wintering sites in Mexico. And it is my pleasure to introduce to all of you Alfonso Alonso, who is an MBF member and conservation biologist at the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. Alfonso, you're on.
Thank you, Eli, for the introduction. And thank you, all of you, for being here tonight, listening to this webinar, our first webinar of the Monarch Butterfly Fund. And also a special thanks to all of you that support us, that allow us to achieve our goals in our organization. As you can see from this beautiful butterfly, you know, even though I have seen this picture so many times, I still enjoy the beauty of this magnificent insect. And I only admire their beauty, but also their fantastic biology. As you know, the population of butterflies of monarch butterflies that is east of the Rocky Mountains migrate every fall to central Mexico. And to answer actually one of the questions that was asked earlier, recent studies have shown that indeed, as monarchs migrate south, they do consume a lot of nectar and they do increase their fat reserves. In fact, one of the studies that I did for my dissertation showed that the butterflies, when they depart from Canada, have much lower amount of fats than when they arrive in Mexico, which is an incredible amount of fat when they get there. When they arrive in Mexico, these are some of the sceneries that you could see if you were happen to be there. What you see in the background is the Oyamel fir forest. It's a type of forest that is found at those high altitudes. And all these orange things that you seem to be flying are actually monarch butterflies. So it is beautiful, spectacular. These forests are locally called the Oyamel forest, as you can see from this map of Mexico, are very restrictly distributed. In the black, you can see that is found only in very few places. And this is mostly because it requires a very particular microclimate, which is exactly the microclimate that the monarch butterflies like to utilize when they are overwintering in Mexico. One of the characteristics of this forest is that it's found about 10,000 feet above sea level. That's a microclimate, as Ernest just explained to us very clearly, is perfect for the butterflies to maintain their lipid reserves. As I said, when they come, they get very fat, and they practically stay on the trees for the entire 5 months with no movement, but to go and drink water. Another advantage of these high altitude mountains is that they receive clouds that bring humidity that, as Ernest explained, is something that the butterflies do actually need. But these butterflies are not spread out throughout the forest. They tend to concentrate in what we call colonies or sanctuaries. And again, this is one of the photos from Sierra Chincua, one of the places that I love the most. And as you can see, all these orange are actually monarch butterflies. So you can see that there are actually millions and millions of butterflies that they concentrate in particular areas, and they select the parts of the tree as Ernest just explained to us. And if we were to walk inside of the forest, this is what we will see. You know, it's a tree that doesn't look like a tree anymore. All these branches are folded, are flexible. You know, the ancestors of these trees are fir trees that came during the Pleistocene glaciation into Mexico. So these trees are adapted to receiving snow. And as you probably have seen, these trees are adapted to receive the weight of the snow. Now in Mexico, what they receive is the weight of these butterflies. The butterflies weigh on average, about half a gram. So you will need about 60 butterflies to reach an ounce. So in order for these branches to be folded, you need to have quite a few number of butterflies, so a large number of them. Now, we can see, you know, the butterflies also like to stay on the tree trunks, as it has an advantage. And it's just again, it's absolutely beautiful how these butterflies concentrate. And one of the challenges is, as I will describe in a minute, is how do we actually count them? How do we know how many are there? The same for this branch. You know, again, a beautiful scenery. You can see some butterflies coming in, but you know, how do we estimate how many are there? That's the the big challenge. So, and the butterflies tend to select the middle of the trees. You know, avoid the upper parts, as Ernest explained to us. So what, after discussing this throughout the years, you know, how do we estimate the number of butterflies? We are still utilizing a method that was proposed by one of Lincoln Brower's main collaborators, Dr. Bill Calvert, who decided that probably the best way to estimate the population of the butterfly was actually measuring the area of the colony. So, you know, just going around estimating what trees have butterflies, which trees do not have, and then from that estimating the area that the butterfly colony was covering, and in that way have an idea of how big the population is year to year as we compare that. So in a few words, what we do is, you know, you go inside of the colony, you mark a tree, and then you find where the next tree that has butterflies is. You measure the distance, and then you also estimate, you know, the angle with respect to the north. And in that way, you obviously record the information, and in that way, you know, the estimate area. But I want to emphasize something that is so crucial that for this particular moment, which is the fact that the person that is responsible for the accurate monitoring of the monarch butterflies in Mexico right now is Eduardo Rendon. Eduardo Rendon works for World Wildlife Fund, and World Wildlife Fund and him created a partnership, a very solid partnership with Telcel, which is a company in Mexico of communications. So Telcel has been supporting for the last years the monitoring of these the monarch butterflies. That's that I will explain in a minute. It's not a simple task. And also there is another very important partner on this endeavor, which is the National Commission of Protected Areas, because they are also very interested in knowing how the butterflies are changing through time. And also it's very important for them to have this information. So just to briefly summarize how we do it, you mark a tree and then you move to the next tree. And then we have to estimate which trees have butterflies and which trees don't have. So we take like an average in terms of not overestimated or underestimating the number of butterflies that actually are in that particular colony at that particular time. Another big challenge in order to estimate the colony size has to do with the time when we do the measurement. This is another photograph from a different angle of Sierra Cinque. And when the butterflies arrive in Mexico in November, they tend to go to the highest point, or one of the among the highest points in the mountain, which is all the way to the top in November. And they also arrive right at the beginning of the dry season. So as the dry season progresses, I mean in December, January, February, the butterflies tend to move lower in elevation. So they stay maybe a week, 7 days or 8 days in one location, and then they continue to move little by little down the slope, primarily following the sources of water. As Ernest pointed out, the butterflies do need to drink water. They do not need to drink nectar, but they do need to drink water. So they follow the creeks, and little by little, basically by the end of the overwintering season, which will be in March, the butterflies are all the way to the bottom of the mountain, where it continues to be wet, where there continues to be humidity in the environment, and they can reach sources of water right before they depart. So the question is, when is the best time to measure these colonies to reduce variation as much as possible? And what was determined is that the butterflies tend to be the most concentrated during the months of December and January. So the data that is collected in December and January is the data that is reported as the area covered by the butterflies. Another important aspect, and this is also very well done by Eduardo, is that there is not only one colony. What I show you photos is Sierra Cinque. The other colony that you saw that Ernest also showed is Sierra Campanario. But as you can see, there are many other overwintering colonies throughout this area. So Eduardo and his team go to each of these places. They walk in the forest, they find the colonies. It's not as simple as it seems. Some colonies are very easy to find, but some of them are also very difficult. I've done that before, and it's not as simple. And once they localize the colony and do the sampling, then all the numbers that are collected from each of these different colonies then is added up, and then a report is presented to the government, and then the government makes a public statement about the numbers of the butterflies. So from this graph, what you can see in the x-axis is when the overwintering season. This is 93, 94. This is actually the year I did my dissertation. So this is the very first data that was collected for this figure. And on the y-axis, you can see the total area in acres. And then you can see all the seasons up to last year. So what we can see also from this figure is a huge variation in the number of butterflies. At the beginning of the sampling when we started doing this study, there seemed to be way many more butterflies as we can see now. And obviously, there are lots of explanations of why this is the case, and the most reliable source of information is that the number of milkweeds in North America has declined because of the use of herbicides, and that has caused the population to decline. In fact, in 2013, 2014, we had the lowest ever recorded area, only 1.66 acres, so which is very, very low. And fortunately, the butterflies recover, and as you can see from the rest of the figure, they have now what we may be calling the new normal, about 6-7 acres. Although 2 years ago was higher, and last year was the same. So we actually don't know what are going to be the numbers for this year. We hope that they will be good, but we will learn that in a couple of months or so. Another important thing to know is that, what we do then is translate this area into numbers of butterflies. And the numbers of butterflies have been estimated to be between 8 to 10 million butterflies per acre. Obviously, the range between 8 and 10 is huge, but as you saw, it's very difficult to actually have a more accurate number. If any of you listening have an idea of how can we estimate these numbers better, we will be more than happy to talk to you and figure out a way to minimize the variation. So I leave you with this beautiful photograph, and I will be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alfonso. Awesome information here. A couple questions here from the audience. And please feel free to continue sending your Q&As over on at the bottom corner of your Zoom page. You are able to write your question, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. Alfonso, you've shown us that the population of monarchs has somewhat decreased than from previous years. Could it perhaps be, one of the questions is that there may be new overwintering sites somewhere along the route of the butterflies?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's very, very good, and I appreciate it. It is, for many years, actually, people have debated if the overwintering sites that we have been monitoring are the only ones that exist in Mexico. Some people have argued that they are maybe overwintering sites further south in Mexico, like in the state of Oaxaca, or they may be overwintering in other parts of Mexico that we haven't not found. And the same token, recently people have described, groups of butterflies that stay in North America. They find sometimes food plants like the tropical milkweed, the butterflies stop migrating, and maybe that's also decreasing. But the point is that these butterflies, in order for them to survive, the winter, because if there is a bad winter in North America, if they don't come to Mexico, they may perish. So and also the monarch butterfly is so popular. Just look at the number of people that came to this webinar. It is very unlikely that there are areas that have monarchs, overwintering monarchs, that we have not found or heard about. So, but again, now with the new technologies, with the new communication, if people think or know of places where these butterflies can be, we will be more than happy to know and try to send a group of people looking for them. But I believe most of the butterflies that come to Mexico are counted by our colleagues in Mexico. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. Next question here on our list. When the monarchs are in the wintering sites, Alfonso, and they take a short flight during a warm day, do they tend to return to the same roosting spot that they were at before they took flight?
Fantastic question. We've been trying to determine that also using different methodologies. In fact, I work with Bill Calvert, the person that I showed you earlier. We tag about 20,000 butterflies in one colony, from that were in the branches, trying to figure out if they will go back to the branches or if they will go to tree trunks and things like this. And you will not believe, but out of the 20,000 butterflies that we tag, we recovered 0. There are so many butterflies that it was impossible to recapture them. People have tried to follow them. I have spent hours trying to follow them. If they come out, they will go back to the same place. But again, the numbers are so much that it is right now impossible to do. Maybe with videography and much more detailed analysis, we could answer that question. But to date, I don't have an answer for that particular question. But it's a very good one.
Thank you. Thank you. One last question here from the audience. Do you know, or do we know if avocado farming is a threat to the monarch butterflies?
The information that we have is that people would like to have plantations of avocados in as many places as possible because it is a very lucrative, obviously, crop, and Mexico is one of the places where the avocados grow very well. We know that there has been some encroachment in the lower parts of the buffer zone of the overwinter of the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve, but that the government of Mexico is working with those owners of those lands to convince them to maintain the type of forest that is native for that. If we look at the ecosystem as a whole, as a big picture for the entire biosphere reserve, the areas that people could be encroaching are the much lower elevations, the places where the butterflies will not be roosting. Mm-hmm. So, for overwintering monarchs, the avocado doesn't grow at the altitudes where the butterflies go, but obviously we prefer to have the ecosystem as intact as possible, so there is the less chance for them to suffer anything. And we don't know what's going to happen with climate change. Obviously, there are predictions of trees moving, changing their altitudes because of their capacities to move in terms of several generations and going to warmer climates. But it's better to not to encroach as much as it's possible to leave the vegetation as is.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thank you very much, Alfonso. And now I will be turning it to my colleague, another MBF board member, Mónica.
Okay, I couldn't figure out how to put the video. So I'm going to introduce Guadalupe Del Rio next, who's one of our partners. She's the head of Alternare, and I've known her for 22 years. When Alternare started, she started it with another biologist in two campesinos, and she's going to talk about the communities and all the local work that she does and Alternare does, because what really impressed me in MBF as well, Alternare is one of our most trusted partners, is that they consider people, not only butterflies, but people. So she's going to talk about how they do sustainable projects. You've probably read about the reforestation that we conduct every year. And so she and Alternare, they all work towards sustainable development and consider the landowners in the communities that are in the Monarch Reserve. So I'll let her speak more about Alternare. Okay, so welcome, Lupita.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here and with so many people listening to our project. I'm going to so everyone can see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see it. It looks great, Lupita. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I love to talk about our model, and what we do since 20 years from now is to practice a comprehensive, sustainable model. We in Alternare believe that in order for the people to conserve, they have to have alternatives, especially in the Monarch Butterfly Reserve, where they are the owners of the area. 95, almost % of the area have an owner, and they are the owners. So our main goal is to protect and to conserve natural resources. But if the people doesn't have alternatives to live, it's going to be impossible. So our model is relying on science, academic support, partnership, and field work. What we do is to train the people and facilitate to conserve natural, the nature and biodiversity to benefit everyone. What we do, we develop capacities, rescue local knowledge, and promote technological innovation. What we want to do is transform the way of using natural resources. Our model has an impact in the environmental, social, and economical. The model is composed by 4 programs and 3 actions lines. I'm going to go very fast through these programs, but they are great. The first one is to train the trainer. And with this program, what we intend is to how to multiply what we do and to be sure that the knowledge stays with the community, even though if Alternare goes, they have the abilities and the knowledge to keep going with this model. It's a great program because the boys and girls stay with us in the training center for almost a year. The second program has to do with food security and sustainable housing. And this program is also great because we work with around 300 families. Almost 95% of the people that are involved in the groups are ladies, because ladies are the ones who have to give food every day. And also they are in charge of cleaning the house and working in the house. So they learn how to build dry latrines or wood-saving stoves or a cistern to capture water. It's a beautiful program. The third one has to do with the forest and water conservation. And this program, we have a view of a watershed. So we have an area, a limited area where we can have indicators to let us know how this is going, how the forest is going, how the water is going. And in this program, we work very close. We have a partner, the University of Mexico, UNAM. And also we work with kids. We have around 30 schools that they produce their trees and later on they go and reforest. And very important one is sustainable productive projects, because even though if the people have more food and better place to live and maybe thinking about water and so on, they need money for the bus, to buy shoes or wherever. The action lines, the first one is a demo training center that we have built in the area. And I like to call this, that this is first world training center for campesinos, because that's how it has to be. And the training center, it's what we want to do there is to demonstrate all the techniques that we teach the people, so they can see that if you follow all these techniques, it's possible to live in a better way. The second one is to build strategic partnerships. We know that we don't have the capacity or the people or the time or the knowledge to know everything. So what we have to do is to work with academics, with researchers, with other NGOs, the government. So together we can have a much better impact in where what you want to accomplish, that is conserve this beautiful forest. And the third one is the innovation. We believe that if you are not moving all the time, trying to incorporate all the new technologies, it's going to be very boring and difficult to get the attention, especially with the young people. This model, it has a multiplying effect. And this is because the people learn how we do it, and also they adopt, but also they want to transmit this knowledge. And this model also promotes environmental conservation, resilience in the community, prevent migration, because the people can make a plan there, and ensure food security and improve nutrition. In general, what we are trying to do is to improve the life quality. Why we are innovative, first of all, is because 22 years ago, it was very difficult for conservationists or even biologists to understand that what we were doing is to conserve. And this was 22 years ago, innovative. But also, we like to incorporate all the innovations, as I was telling you, like using the phones, or now we have monitors in the soil. We are trying to do agriculture using digital tools. So we have established a culture of innovation in all programs. In these 22 years, some of our achievements are a lot, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, but the first one is the one for us is the most important, is to build the trust with the people. It's impossible to work with the people if they don't have, if we don't have the trust to change the way of using natural resources. Of course, we've been reforested more than 300 trees with the production of the trees that are producing in the schools, with a very good survival, around 25%, which is very good. And we have formed more than 160 leaders around the area. Also, well, full efficient stoves, cisterns, dry latrines. In general, we have been benefit more than 116,000 people. And also we've been working with the university and the government to have a plan of how to work with the fire. Also, I like to share with you these sustainable development goals, because this is something that all countries will have to be doing to conserve all natural resources around the world. So for us, in a long term, thinking in a long term, what we want to accomplish is zero poverty and life on the land. But in the middle, it is in our everyday work with the people, we achieve and we work with these 8 objectives. So we are very proud, because even though it's in a small scale, we are helping to gain to arrive meet the goal of development. Also, well, this is to be proud, because there's good things that are happening in Mexico, and I think this project is one of those. And I'd like to share with you some of our acknowledgements. And in 2018, the FAO gave us a prize for being one of the Scalable Innovator Initiative. Also in 2018, we got the Conservation Championship by the Fish and Wildlife Service and the OEA. Since 2016, 17, and 18, Premios Latin America Verdes gave us, we are being in the 30 best projects, and so on. Also, last year, 2020, with the pandemic situation, we got a prize by the Inter-American Development Bank. They give us a recognition as one of the best innovative and effective initiatives to improve life. And well, we are very proud to present all our partners and people that have been believing in this project. And here is Monarch Butterfly Fund. That for us has been really important and a very good support. And some of the networks where we are part of it, and I like to just to mention Red Monarca, Monarca Web. And this is very important because we come together, different organizations that are working in the reserve. Sometimes in Mexico, it's hard to work together, but this is working. We've been doing a very good projects together. And I just would like to take this time to invite you to join this project through Monarch Butterfly Fund. They've been really good partners with us, and we really like to invite everyone to come to this project and to see that giving the people alternatives is possible to conserve natural resources, especially the Monarch Butterfly Reserve, which is a beauty. Thank you. I would be very glad to answer some questions.
Yes, hold on. Okay. Let's see. There's one question. There's not a lot of questions about the people, but how did you detect the importance of promoting the inseparable link between the people and environmental conservation?
Well, it's that's a very good question. Thank you very much. It's how Alternare started. The first workshop that we did in the Monarch Butterfly was in 1994. And we did it with a group of campesinos. Two of them belongs to the Alternare team. And this was a very special workshop. We talk about we did a diagnostic, and we asked them what were their problems and how they wanted to see in the future. And they started to explain all the problems that they have in the living in the reserve and all this. And then we realized, the other biology and myself said, well, you know, the conservation this is the way to conserve, especially in places where it's in habitat like the Monarch Butterfly Reserve, and especially if they are the owners. If you don't work with the people and if you don't give alternatives to live on, it's going to be impossible. Because if you are hungry and your kids are hungry, I believe that everyone that is here, 250 people, are going to cut the first tree and sell it to have food and to put food on your table. So at that moment, we realized that this was the way to do it. If we wanted to save the reserve or any other protected area, you have to work with the people. Thank you very much for the question. I love that question.
Okay, so another one is another participant is asking, how important is tourism to the local economy? Does it benefit the local communities? And how do you develop income during the whole year?
We as Alternare or for the people,
In general, because you don't really do tourism, but you do give them options to have some income during the year, right?
Well, that's also a very good question, because people that goes to the reserve, they believe that all the communities get money out of the tourism, and that's not true. As Alfonso was showing, the sanctuaries are just these places, and maybe eight communities will have benefit for the tourists. And there is 34 communities living in the nuclear area where they don't have benefit for the tourists, but they also cannot use the forest. So that's another problem in order to conserve, because the people, they don't see money for the tourists, they cannot use the forest. So that's that answer one part of what I'm thinking. The other part is, yes, the communities get money. The communities that get the money, that's around 8 communities, they get money, but all depends on the big of the community. Population in each community is very different. One community, as Ernest was saying, Sierra Chinca, that I also love, they have 30 ejidos. But also you go to El Rosario and they have 200 ejidatarios or people working. So it's very, it's not even what they get from the tourists. They divide within the community.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions related to you, but Rebecca and Catherine are really congratulating you, Lupita personally, and Alternare for a really good job that you're doing. And I guess that's all for our part.
Thank you very much. I would love to invite everyone to the training center and to talk with the communities that we work with. And as I was telling you, this is some things that are good that happening in Mexico. It's not just bad things.
Thank you, Lupita. And so now Don Davis, who's our chair, will give the closing remarks. I think the webinar is over. Okay, so I'll hand it over to you, Don. Let me just
Now I understand that another screen will be coming on. Great, there we go. Good evening. I'm Don Davis, Chair of the Monarch Butterfly Fund. Before we take a few more questions, I would like to thank you for attending our first Monarch Butterfly Fund webinar. Now in our 12th year, the Monarch Butterfly Fund will continue to foster the conservation of monarchs and their migration in Mexico through our partnerships, in particular with Alternare, but also with other Mexican organizations, researchers, and local communities in the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve. At this time in our history, monarchs face numerous challenges, with plummeting numbers in the West and declining numbers in the Mexican overwintering colonies. We need to act now. As a registered nonprofit organization, MBF relies on our generous donors to achieve our mission and vision. I invite you to join us in this important work. Visit our website at monarchconservation.org to learn more about MBF, what we have accomplished, and to receive our newsletters. Should you be interested in working with MBF, possibly as a director, you can reach us through the contact form on our website homepage. We would also welcome any feedback you may have concerning this first webinar and possible topics of interest for future presentations. Thank you for watching.
All right. Thank you, Don. So this is Karen. Maybe the board members could turn their screen or their cameras back on so that people can see us. And I think you've been introduced to all of our board members except Isabel Ramírez, who's at the top. Isabel, do you want to just unmute and say hi and a little bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Isabel Ramírez. I'm part of this wonderful team of passionate people who work hard to protect the monarchs and the overwintering sites and the people who live in this area. I work at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and I'm happy to be a close partner with Alternare for many years and be part of MBF. So I thank you for this wonderful attendance of this first webinar, and we are here to answer your questions and to continue in this shared passion, the monarch conservation.
Great. So what we'll do, we still have a lot of people on and we have a lot of questions. We will not get to all of these questions, but we'll just take turns asking them and then we'll kind of see when you all sign off. But if you are signing off, thank you so much for being with us. It's just been really exciting to have everyone here. So here, I'm not sure if anyone can answer this question, but I'll put it out to all of my colleagues in Mexico. Cindy asks, is it true that the speed on the highways in Saltillo, Mexico are reduced for the few weeks that the monarchs are traveling through? Alfonso or Isabel or Lupita, do you know the answer to that?
Well, may I? So
Yeah.
I've heard that it's only signs. So people is warned about the path of the monarchs, and they are asked to slow their speed, but it's not mandatory. So it's an option, but people have been responding pretty well, and maybe because they see the other drivers to slow the speed, so it is working a little bit. So it's part of this consciousness that we are getting about monarch conservation.
All right, thanks, Isabel. And I'm actually gonna take one question for myself. And then I think that Alfonso will probably, and Ernest will probably have more to say about. This is a question from Kathleen, who said, I have heard that more important than our planting milkweeds for reproduction is to plant the late season flowering natives for them to nectar on their roots south. And I'm gonna take the first stab at that, and then Alfonso and Eduard and Ernest jump in if you wanna say more. I like to think of the monarch, all of the parts of the monarch annual cycle of breeding and migrating as a chain. And a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So it's really difficult to say that focusing on one aspect of this annual cycle is more important than the other. So planting milkweeds for reproduction is very important, because without enough milkweeds for the monarchs, there won't be enough monarchs flying south. But as you heard from my colleagues, they need to end up in Mexico fat. If they aren't fat, they'll never get enough to eat there, so they won't be able to survive. So that is equally as important. So we need to do both. So what I'm going to do is maybe transfer this to Alfonso, and you can say more, and then you can ask the next question.
Okay. If you don't mind, maybe you should look for the next question while I answer, because I'm not looking at the questions right now.
Okay.
Please. But thank you for the question, Kathleen. And I completely agree with Karen. I think it's very important to have all the links of the chain very tight. But the more nectar the butterflies have available as they migrate south, the better. So, you know, I've seen them stopping in any possibility that they have. So if you put plants that produce nectar, I'm pretty sure the butterflies will love it. And the more nectar they have, they transform it into fat. They will get with good resources to Mexico, and they will be very happy. So it's very important to have nectar. Yes, it's very important also to have milkweeds. So thank you. And they do feed along Mexico. There have been studies recent by colleagues from the University of Morelia, where Isabel is, that are studying actually the pollen that the butterflies carry, and they are finding that indeed they do nectar a lot in the northern part of Mexico. This is a time when a lot of the plants are producing flowers, getting ready for the winter. So, you know, the more nectar, the better. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Here's one that I think would be fun for Alfonso or Ernest or Isabel. And then if someone else wants to ask the next question, that would be great. But do the monarchs go to the tree trunks first or to the boughs, or is it random when they're first colonizing the site? So this is a question from Renee Davis. Where do they go?
Well, I think that's, I don't know the answer to that. I think that would be very hard to determine. That is, they're coming back to the colonies, to the areas, and gradually adding to the trees. The aggregations are increasing. And I don't know about first settling. Alfonso, do you know more?
Yeah, what I have seen, you know, especially when the butterflies are moving, you know, when they are going to wetter areas, the butterflies first tend to land in areas where they can sunbathe, meaning on the branches. They open their wings, they warm up, and as the sun sets, they close their wings and then they settle in those branches. So I believe that the branches get colonized first. And then, you know, as they are concentrating, then they move into the tree trunks and the rest of the interior of the branches. That's what I have seen. It, again, when the butterflies are moving. But when they first form the first colonies, when they arrive in November, I have not seen that, so I will not be able to answer if they go to the tree trunks first. As Ernest showed, there is an advantage for that, but I have not seen that myself per se.
The other thing I would just add is that, of course, we're interpreting and describing what we see now, but the forest was a little different hundreds of years ago, 1,000 years ago, and we don't really know how they were responding then. We can only see how they're responding now.
Yeah, I would like to add something. So at the beginning of the season, the last days of October or the first day of November, they fly, even before the locals find the colonies, the clusters, the congregations of monarchs. They fly and fly by millions, and you can see them flying in circles, like crazy, but in the same area. So what I've seen is they place, first of all, in small box, in branches, even before forming the colonies. So this is at the beginning of the season. But along the season, I would say that it depends on the weather. So when they fly to search for water, when they come back, well, it's as Alfonso explained, it's impossible to know if they are the very same butterflies that you saw earlier flying away, but it depends on the day. So if they arrive when the sun is still bright and hot, they used to land directly to their branches. But if they arrive, let's say late, or if it is cloudy, they land in the first thing they can reach. For example, bushes, or bushes, mainly bushes, or the peripheral branches. So the trunks, it's hard to land on the trunks. So the trunks are mostly when they need to climb up to protect. So it's Alfonso mentioned it too. So every day, every single day is completely different. Every single minute in a very same day is completely different. So it's a permanent spectacle. So you never get tired of seeing, because you never see the same. So it's a wonderful experience.
And I'm gonna, there are a couple people that asked this, and this is for you, Lupita, specifically. I'm quite sure these questions are meant for you. This is from Lisa and Marion, who wonder if there are opportunities to volunteer with Alternare. You need to unmute yourself.
Yes, of course, there is a lot of things to do in Alternare. So yes, especially to work with the people, but it's an excellent experience, because usually people arrive volunteer to work with the people, but at the end, we all learn more about the people, and volunteers get really happy because they learn and work with the people. And of course, we have a program for volunteers. So if they want to write to us directly, we are happy to let you know which kind of work you can do. There's lots of things to do, for sure.
Great. I'm going to take another one, and I bet Alfonso will have something to say about this one too. Do monarchs try to mate in Mexico? This is from Amy Chamberlain, who's a good friend of mine. Do monarchs try to mate in Mexico, or do they wait until they travel north? And my answer to this one is both of the above. Actually, you can see monarchs mating even as early as January, and they won't leave until March. And you start to see the amount of mating behavior builds up. But what we actually see is the first pairs that you see forming are the little skinny males. So it's the very skinny males that are the first ones to start trying to mate with the females. And we think that the reason for that is that those skinny males are not going to last until the end of the winter. So if they don't mate early, they don't have a chance of getting their genes into the next generation. The problem with that strategy is if a male mates early with a female and then he dies, if the female mates again, which she probably will, his sperm get kind of pushed back, and it's less likely that the female will use the sperm from that first male. So they're sort of making the best of a bad job, those skinny males. And both, unlike some people say, both males and females move north as they're migrating. So those males just keep moving north with the females to keep mating with them, because the last male in is the first male out. You have more to add to that, Alfonso? Because you've worked on that too.
Yes. The only thing that I will add to that is that when those very small males are mating in January, they are selecting the biggest, most beautiful females. Right. They don't just choose whatever female is flying. They get the very best, big, beautiful females. So they are really betting their chances in passing their genes to the next generation and putting into a strong looking female that they hope will migrate back to the US and will lay eggs, with their sperm basically. But as you said, there are many more times where the butterflies, females, will mate and then they push the spermatophore in. So it will very unlikely be able to fertilize any eggs. Tanya Van Hook, who did her dissertation in Mexico studying this system, found that some butterflies mate up to 10 times. So the number of times that the butterflies mate is quite high. That will, thank you.
The females, it's hard to tell how many times the males mate, but the females we can actually tell. That's how I got my start with monarchs, studying mating behavior. Oh, there are so many good questions here, but here's another one that you can answer, Alfonso, if you're willing to. Is the density of monarchs on the trees consistent, both from tree to tree and year to year?
I wish I could say yes, but the answer is who knows. It's very, very, very difficult to see. You know, even from one day to the next, you can go to the exact same tree and it seems like it has the same number of butterflies, but you saw many butterflies flying out. So it is very, very hard to tell, you know, densities on the trees because they are so concentrated that it's not possible to determine that. That is one of the biggest questions. We have tried taking videography, photography to try to see, you know, how this changes, but even with the new technologies, is not a simple answer as I wish it was.
And so here's a question from somebody you know well, Alfonso, from Leanne Alonso. Hi, Leanne. Do they use satellite imagery to determine the area that has monarchs?
We have tried that. The thing is that the two examples that I show in terms of the butterflies being able to see very easily from the sky, those are rare events. Most of the times the butterflies have their wings closed and you will never see the orange. And so Lincoln tried, you know, flying over the central volcanic belt in Mexico looking for more areas, and he was unable to find things. So it's not as simple to detect the colonies or to sample the colonies if the butterflies don't have their wings open, so you don't see the orange. And they normally have their wings closed, so it's beige, and it's not as simple as is a little bit misleading of what we show. Thank you.
Gail, here's a good one for you. This is from Claudia, who says monarch migration focus seems to be via Texas. What impact on the overall numbers of monarchs is through the Western United States, like through Arizona and Colorado and California?
Great question. And we are still learning more about that. We do know that some monarchs through Arizona go to Mexico and New Mexico as well. We're not sure of the actual number because they vary from year to year. So we're continuing to learn, and hopefully we'll be able to learn more in the years to come.
All right. So I want to make sure that do any of my colleagues have questions that they'd like to ask?
I'd like to throw one question out that several people asked about the predators at the reserve that the monarchs are facing.
Well, there have been studies of the predators. There are two species of birds, a grosbeak and an oriole, that are able successfully to feed. They feed a little differently on the monarchs by slitting the abdomen and avoiding some of the plant poisons that they've accumulated. There also is mice predation on the forest floor. And those studies had been done years ago, and others on the panel may wish to add to that.
Yeah, if I just add a couple of comments, there are 4 species of mice in the areas, and only one is able to feed on them. But this particular mice or species of mouse feeds mostly on dead monarchs. If they found a live one, they will eat it as well. But butterflies tend to avoid being on the ground. If they are dislodged from the tree branches or the tree trunks and fall to the ground, they immediately crawl away from being on the ground. They warm up their wings by shivering, and they move away from the ground. So mostly what the mice will feed on is in dead butterflies on the ground. And the birds these two species of birds do feed on them heavily. They go in the morning, very early in the morning, very late in the afternoon, and they prefer to select clusters that are in open areas. We did a study years ago that showed that the predation is higher if the butterflies are found in open areas than in closed areas. Thank you.
I will add that it's really pretty stunning to be in a colony and look up at the clusters and to see these birds come in. And you start seeing wings falling down to the forest floor. They really are feeding.
Yeah, it's amazing. So here's another question about the overwintering biology. Is there a species of tree in the forest that the butterflies prefer? This question is from Terry Nightingale.
Well, you can find clusters of monarchs on the 3 common species of trees that are there. Mostly it's on the OML fir, but there are clusters on pine. There's a long-needled pine and also a cedar. In fact, if I even, well, I guess I can't do it now. I could show you a slide of clusters on all 3 species of trees. Mostly they're on OML fir, but they're also on these other 2 kinds of trees. One of the things we wondered at one point was how much the architecture of the tree influenced where they roosted. But certainly they're mostly on OML fir.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in here, oh, Alfonso, you can too. Just one quick thing is they're mostly on the OML, but the OML is the most common tree in the forest. And one of the things that I've thought a lot about, because I've done some work in the California colonies as well, and those of you that have visited those colonies know they're mostly on eucalyptus trees. And I thought that was strange because eucalyptus is an introduced species in California. But when I went there and looked at the places where the butterflies were, basically that's all that was growing there. So in my opinion, they're just using what's there. They're looking for the microclimate, and they happen to like the same microclimate as the OML trees.
Right.
You have anything else to add there, Alfonso?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I have even seen them cluster in oaks, in the lower elevations. They do cluster in oaks. But if they have the opportunity to cluster in oyamels, I think they will prefer that, because the needles are smaller and they can be closer to each other. So that reduces the potential predation. So I've seen them more densely concentrated in fir trees than in pines or oaks or even in eucalyptus in California.
Yes, that's part of the architecture argument that we were thinking of.
Yeah. And one final, I think we'll, I'm going to make the executive decision here to wrap it up, but I think this is a really interesting question, and I think a lot of you will have thoughts about this one. How specific is their site fidelity? This is from Catherine Lahaye. How specific is their site fidelity year to year within the forest? Is it dependent on environmental conditions or water sources, or what?
Well, this is one of the main mysteries to be solved yet. So they are, it's a high fidelity to an area. So, but that area comprehendes about 100 hectares, and you have heard that they are concentrated in very few hectares. So they move around areas, but the very specific site, the very specific trees varies from year to year. So they stay in the same properties, in the same areas, but with slight differences in the trees, depending on it's a question yet, no? What is the environmental clue that they have to form the colonies each year.
Yeah, I think Isabel is exactly right on that. I will tell you one thing that I tried doing, went to a site on Cinque where the colony had been the previous winter, and they were not there the winter I was there, and went digging in the soil, trying to find remnants of wings to see if there could be any chemical clue that might draw them back to the same place. And all I can say is I couldn't find any remnants.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I may add also, depends on the area that they have to choose from. You know, in the area that you see behind Ernest in his picture, that is El Rosario. And El Rosario is the most consistent colony of all. They tend to be, thank you. They tend to go to the exact same location. The fidelity in El Rosario is the most consistent in all other places. Although also in Errada, which is a different colony, they are very consistent to the same trees year after year. But for example, in Cinque, that they have a much bigger area, their fidelity is not as precise to the particular trees. Or even though I have seen them from year to year on the same tree, their variation is much bigger. They move much more in that particular location. So we don't really know. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else want to get in a last word here? All right. Well, thank you to the 146 people who are still here. This was really exciting for us to do. And I hope that we'll be able to download your questions. We're sorry, there are still 68 questions that we didn't get to. And it's not that they weren't good. It's that we just didn't have time, and it ended up being a little random how we picked them. So thank you all so much. And I'd like to thank all of my fellow panelists, MBF board members, and Lupita and Monica. It's just really been a great experience. So thanks to everyone for being part of our first inaugural webinar.
So long.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Have a good
Thank you
day.
very much. Bye.
Thank you.